guys. Welcome. Great to see you all. Great to see you all this evening. How are we? How is everybody? How is everybody? Here we are again. It's not long since the Paper One stream, right? Just a few days later, we're back again. We're back again. A quick turnaround for Paper Two. My God, it's a big deal that Paper One is done, right? How are you guys feeling? How was Paper One? Let me know in the comments. Are you feeling good? Are you feeling a bit like you could have done better? Are you motivated for tomorrow? Can't wait for tomorrow. I've had a buzzing day. I don't know about you guys. Absolutely buzzing day today. Now, I know you guys are writing the exams and doing hard work. I'm putting in lots of hard work too. I'm feeling that energy. Yeah, Paper One out the way, the nerves, the tension, the anxieties. Hopefully we can park that to one side now and enjoy this exam tomorrow. Yeah, Paper Two, macro. It's good times. It's happy times, enjoyable times. But I don't know, is that how you're feeling? That's how I'm feeling. Let me know. It's a big deal, you know. Paper One is done. Paper One, very technical exam. It can be awkward, very intimidating, very much so. I know a lot of you were feeling those nerves beforehand. Very natural before Paper One. It's got that kind of, stigma to it, doesn't it, Paper One? So for that to be out the way is a big deal. Massive congrats to you all for getting through that Paper One. And hopefully it is a good feeling now for Paper Two. So yeah, no, in this stream, just like we did with Paper One, it's all great advice at this stage, the day before the exam, key tips, key things to be doing in this remaining time to make sure that you can knock the socks off the examiner tomorrow. So like with the Paper One stream, take everything in, follow the advice very carefully. It will take you to a high level, that's for sure. That's for sure. So yeah, know that Paper Two is always a great paper. Paper One can be hit or miss. Seems like Paper One was good this year, but Paper Two is always a wonderful time. Macro tends to be a bit more comfortable content-wise. The questions tend to be a bit more comfortable as well. It's going to be better than Paper One. I know that. So regardless of how Paper One went, hopefully it went great for you. But even if it didn't, you felt like you left a bit in the locker or there are a few things you could have done better, don't worry too much. Plenty of gains to be made now for Paper Two. But hey, even if it did go well, Paper One, no complacency. Nuh-uh. No inefficiency. No taking things for granted. Not taking things lightly. No, Paper One is only a third of your overall final grade. And there's a lot to play for still with Paper Two. So we're going in with the same intensity, with the same mentality, with the same fight mentality, to slay that examiner again. So regardless of how Paper One went, you should be dissecting your performance in high detail. Let's go through a little checklist. You could be thinking, hey, was my time management good? Really think about that. The strategies you had, were they working? Did you actually have strategies in the first place? Could you have used better strategies? Think about what you're going to do. If time management was slightly off, how to make it better. If it was good, what did you do to make it good? Make sure you recreate that. What about the detail that you are writing in? Now you can really self-assess. Were you writing in high quality detail or were you skimping in your analysis and evaluation paragraphs a little bit? Could you have extended those more so? Because we know that detail is what scores you the highest marks. What about your use of diagrams? I said very strongly in Paper One, really look to use diagrams well. Did you do that? Did you use diagrams to back up your analysis and your evaluation? You want to be doing the same thing in Paper Two if you did. If not, you felt there were missed opportunities. Get those diagrams in. There are loads in Paper Two, again, that you can use to back up points you're writing in analysis and evaluation. If it was an opportunity missed, rectify for Paper Two. What about your use of extracts? Questions that were linked to extracts. Were you actually using the extracts, quoting them in your paragraphs? Were you letting the extracts drive the points that you were writing? Hopefully you did. If not, that's an area to improve. And questions that weren't linked to extracts, where your own examples were necessary. Were you using your own examples? Did you have them at hand? Then think about, the time before the exam paper started, those big nerves. A lot of people were messaging me and saying, oh, it was panic stations. I was so nervous. I didn't really know how to manage my nerves. What if that happens again tomorrow? Economics exams often trigger those nerves. Have strategies in place to manage those nerves. And also think, were you answering the question set? Did you actually highlight keywords in the question? And did you actually focus your response on what the question actually was? These are all good things to think about, to dissect, because you've got to make sure paper 2 goes as well as paper 1 or goes better than paper 1. So that's a key starting point. Know that with macro, the question wording can be awkward. We think in paper 1 it can be a bit more technical, a bit more awkward. It can be in paper 2 as well, some awkward wording. Remember what I said in my live stream for paper 1. If you see awkward questions and you have to do it, don't worry too much. You've done so much hard work. The key is dissect what content area is underneath that awkward wording, and you'll be able to come out with points from there. So don't just panic if you see awkward wording. Follow that guidance and you'll be okay. But also in macro, questions can be very narrow focused. You've got to make sure you're targeting what the question is asking. So if the question is about macro performance, your points need to be relevant to the macro objectives. If the point is targeting consumers, make sure that your arguments are targeting consumer impacts. If you see a question is about the budget deficit, don't think it's about the current account deficit. Remember, the budget deficit, when government spending is more than tax revenue in a year, it's all about government finances. Whereas the current account deficit is all about trade. So many marks are lost, confusing the two. So highlighting key parts of the question, making sure your points, your arguments is targeting what the question actually wants from you, not what you hope it wants from you, is going to be very important. Now, I've talked about the importance of examples in paper 1. For paper 2, it's UK economy knowledge. All your exam boards here are UK exam boards. Most of the questions that will come up will be linked to the UK economy or to just key themes in the UK economy. So knowledge of the UK economy will be a stunning way for you to get ahead of others, for you to weigh up arguments in your analysis and your evaluation, and for you to pick better points. Writing in context, examiners call it contextual awareness, is an A-star thing to do. So know some core stats that are going to help you. I'll give you some core ones I know you'll be writing about tomorrow. So let's start with annual growth. In 2023, the UK economy only grew by 0.1%. Technically, we've been in recession. The last 2 quarters of 2023 were both negative growth rates. So yes, in recession. We have formally come out of recession. Growth rate in Q1 2024 was 0.6%. That figure came out last week. So technically, yes, out of recession, but economic growth not in good shape at the moment. Our forecast growth rate for this year is only 0.8%, very paltry. Unemployment has just gone up a little bit, 4.3%, so know that. CPI inflation is at 3.2%. A big concern we have is wage growth. Annual wage growth in the UK is 5.7%, very strong. Know about core inflation. Core inflation is 4.2. So those last 2 figures tell you that inflation is still very much a fight in this country, and it's still a concern. Our current account deficit as a percent of GDP, 3.2%. Our budget deficit in this last fiscal year was 4.2% of GDP. Our national debt, the total stock of government debt, 98% of GDP as we're talking. The Bank of England base rate, interest rate, 5.25%. Know that we have a very, very small negative output gap in the UK right now. That's not because our growth rate, our actual growth rate is high. It's because potential growth has been hammered. That's the major reason why. So a very small negative output gap. So if you're shifting AD right or talking about policies that can shift AD right, the demand pull inflation trade-off is a real one. The last one, Gini coefficient, 0.357 in the UK. It's risen in the last year. There are very clear reasons why. So that's a nice figure to talk about as well. All those figures, all those stats, I'm sure you'll be mentioning those somewhere in your exam tomorrow. But yes, weighing up arguments with them, picking points in context, writing in context, that could be an A-star thing to do. Okay, so yeah, know those stats well. My UK economy stats video will be wonderful. If you forget a stat, don't worry. Talking generally, like if you say inflation is above target, that is fine. You're still going to get application credit if you're talking generally. But of course, if you know the exact figure, it's going to scream like, how good am I? It's going to scream confidence. It will just look better if you're able to do that. In terms of topic areas, let's go to year 2 big topic areas. We know what they are. My advice to you is for every analysis point you know in these topic areas, have an evaluation point that you can use, like your go-to evaluation. So take, for example, exchange rates. We know that consequences of exchange rate changes could well feature. Take a weak exchange rate. So when you're analyzing a weak exchange rate, what's your go-to evaluation going to be? Marshall Lerner comes to mind. Incomes at home, incomes abroad come to mind. A next big topic area, year 2, trade And protectionism. Well, for every reason for protectionism, have a go-to evaluation point in your mind. The infant industry argument, you can evaluate with long-run complacency and inefficiency. Protect against dumping. Yeah, but it's hard to prove. There is a formal process that countries need to follow going through the World Trade Organization. That could be good evaluation. Protect against unemployment. Yeah, but is that industry already lacking a comparative advantage? Is protectionism just delaying the inevitable? Is it better for governments to use other policies to deal with an industry that's simply not competitive? Protectionism to reduce a current account deficit, promote growth, retaliation, your go-to EVA. Think like that. A nice way to add some extra spice to your revision tonight and tomorrow. What about your pros of free trade? You can evaluate any of those with reasons for protectionism. Yes, all a smart thing to do. Take development economics. This is another big topic area that could easily feature tomorrow for you guys. A little checklist for your revision of development. You start with basics, don't you? Like how we define development, how we measure it, factors that can promote development, barriers to development. But then you go to big, heavy, weighty essay areas. Let me tell you, when big essays come on development, they're always worded the same way. You can take down this list. So often essays are about growth and development, discussing growth and development, discussing trade for development or protectionism for development, discussing FDI for development, discussing aid for development, discussing market-based policies for development or interventionist policies for development. Questions are always worded that way. If it comes up tomorrow, it's going to be one of those. I know it. So the smart thing to do in your revision is to make sure for all those big essay titles, do you know the pros and cons and do you know your evaluation points? If you're revising smartly like that and a development question comes up, you know you're going to blast it. So that's a smart way to revise what is a very weighty, big topic area, year 2 macro there. If you're an AQA student, make sure you're also weighing up the consequences of a current account deficit and a current account surplus. Add that big time into your revision. Weigh it up in the remaining time if you're an AQA student, that's for sure. Now let's move to year 1 topic areas. Some year 1 topic areas, honestly, are taken for granted by students. We can't afford to do that. Start with AD and AS. You might think, boy, it's so simple. You did it way back in year 1. And you think, well, surely I know this very well. Do not underplay it. Do not take it for granted. First of all, check. Do you know your shift is inside out of AD, of SRAS, of LRAS? Like in high detail where you can write chains of analysis correctly. Make sure you know that. But then when it comes to shifting AD, SRAS, LRAS, know that we can link to the macro objectives. That's the beauty of this model. It's the backbone of everything in macroeconomics, right? Because from our shift, we can link to the macro objectives. So taking AD shift right, we know that can increase economic growth. We know that can reduce unemployment. It'll be cyclical unemployment. We know it can increase demand pull inflation. We know in theory it can worsen the trade deficit. But in your revision, add why those things could happen. Adding why when you're writing will give you more analysis credit. So just think why. Know why. Anytime you're shifting a curve, you're linking to the macro objectives, write down why those things happen. The examiner will love you. So don't underplay ADAS. You'll be drawing those diagrams all over the place tomorrow. They are the bedrock of everything in macro. Make sure you revise it weightily. Then to a huge topic area in year 1, growth, unemployment, inflation, and deflation. These key macro performance indicators. I'll tell you key areas that normally are heavily under-revised and students get found out when they're doing their paper 2. 1, do you know in detail how we measure all of these different indicators? So how the CPI works in detail to give us an inflation rate, how the LFS works in giving us an unemployment rate. Know that in detail. Then know the problems with those measures. Yeah, normally not known at all by people. But that's great because you might get an essay question about problems with the CPI, problems with GDP, problems with the LFS measure of unemployment. But even if you don't get a direct question on it, they could be great evaluation points. If you're writing an essay about the benefits of low unemployment, right? And how that should be a good thing, how it should boost living standards, you can always evaluate, yeah, but what if we're measuring unemployment wrong? You know, what are the problems with the LFS measure? Nice way to evaluate. If you get an essay about the benefits of low inflation, you can then evaluate with, yeah, but what if we're not measuring inflation correctly? What are holes in the CPI that actually means that low rate of inflation might not be as good as theory suggests? So you can use those problems with our measures as great evaluation points for those questions. And then the other area, which is a big 25 mark area, or it could be something smaller, is knowing the consequences, the costs and benefits of growth, of unemployment, of inflation and deflation. These are normally big, weighty 25 mark areas. So important that you know your costs and benefits and your evaluation points there. So often year one topics can be under revised. Just ensure that's not you. Ensure you've given them due weight. And then we know the big daddy of macro questions. It's very much macro policy, isn't it? Normally every year, there is at least one big essay on macro policy. We're expecting that to be the case again tomorrow. So with macro policy, I always think there's an easy side to it and then there's a hard side to it. The easy side, no doubt, expansionary fiscal policy, expansionary monetary policy, and supply side policies for the usual goal of boosting LRAS and increasing potential growth. But even if you get easy questions, which will be very lucky if you do, there is a way to show off in analysis. Take expansionary fiscal policy. Talk about different types of tax cuts. Is it corporation tax? Is it national insurance? Is it income tax? Be specific. Even government spending increasing. Be precise. What areas can government spend on? When you develop your chains, go into the multiplier effect from those chains as well. For expansionary monetary policy, you can go through the transmission mechanism of how a central bank interest rate change can feed through into the wider economy in a multitude of different avenues to then affect AD and impact the real economy. So showcase good knowledge of that transmission mechanism, but also know you've got quantitative easing as a secondary option of expansionary monetary policy. So bringing in QE as a second option with great chains of analysis would be a great way to show off. And for supply side policies, it's going into the groups. You've got interventionist supply side policies. You've got market-based supply side policies that you can break into 3 different groups. So making an essay plan based on the groups of supply side policies would again impress examiners, showing off good, wider content knowledge of supply side policies. But you can also show off in your evaluation. Here are some great evaluation points that you can use when you're evaluating expansionary fiscal and monetary policy. So for expansionary fiscal policy, the crowding out effect, a free market critique of expansionary fiscal policy would be a great thing to talk about. But then also know the Keynesian retort to crowding out, which is no, actually, expansionary fiscal policy could crowd in the private sector by promoting greater economic activity, greater growth, greater employment. Private sector firms might be wanting to tap into that. A great time to invest and grow your business, looking at that as a profit opportunity for private sector firms, actually promoting investment. That's the crowding in effect. If you're worried about expansionary fiscal policy harming government finances, why not talk about the impact on government bond interest rates? Like we saw after the Truss and Kwarteng mini budget, how bond interest rates soared because of wild, unfunded expansionary fiscal policy. You can talk about Ricardian equivalence as well if you're worried about how governments are funding their expansionary fiscal policies. You can worry about the huge spending on debt interest. You can worry about burdens on future generations. All good points. Then you've got the role of the automatic stabilizers. Lovely evaluation point. The size of the multiplier, Laffer curve effects. These are all wonderful ways to evaluate expansionary fiscal policy. So know to use those as opposed to basic arguments to try and score higher marks in evaluation. For expansionary monetary policy, you've got liquidity trap arguments. You've got whether banks are willing to lend. Again, great ways to show off if you can pull it off, as long as you can write in detail. These are cool things to talk about. But for me, that's still the easy side. Often when macro policy questions come up, they're focusing more on the harder side. So that is contractionary fiscal policy and contractionary monetary policy, much harder than the expansionary side. And often the wording can be a bit tricky. So contractionary fiscal policy might be worded in terms of budget deficit reduction, the pros and cons of budget deficit reduction, or reduction of the national debt, whether it's necessary, whether it's desirable, and even higher interest rates, like whether that's necessary, whether it's desirable, discussing the impacts of it, discuss whether interest rates need to be raised further. So for both of these topic areas, you need to know the pros and cons of budget deficit reduction and of higher interest rates as a contractionary monetary policy. They're both major themes in the UK at the moment. They're very much harder essays. I've got videos in my year one macro playlist. If you haven't watched those, watch those to get the pros and cons and you'll be good to go. I've also made videos on monetary policy themes and fiscal policy themes. We are on the contractionary side of both policies in the UK at the moment. So it's very, high chance it could be an essay this year. So make sure you watch those themes videos so you know the context, as well as the general pros and cons that you can be writing about. And then for the supply side policies, the hardest side to those is if the question asks you to talk about more novel themes. So supply side policies to reduce inactivity, to reduce the natural rate of unemployment, to improve productivity, to improve international competitiveness of exports, to then reduce the current account deficit. They're more novel uses of supply side policies. So again, just watch my video on supply side policy themes. I've in a video gone through all of those major themes, all of those potential questions, and I've guided you what you could write about there. But you need to make sure with macro policy, you're not just revising the easy side, you're also revising the harder side. So then you're fully prepared for any kind of question that will come on macro policy tomorrow. That's a very important top tip. As we push to the end of this stream, think about how you're going to use the remaining time before paper 2. The lucky thing this time is that it's a PM exam. So you've got the rest of the evening today, you've got half of the day tomorrow, right? What are you going to do in that time? I recommend 4 things. First of all, it's content mastery. You want to be razor sharp with your content so that there are no holes, so that examiners can't find you out with anything. So content knowledge, mastery of everything in the course should be a key focus. Then it's essay planning, but essay planning under strict time conditions, because that's what you're going to be doing tomorrow. So a wide variety of essay plans for a load of different topic areas in the course is a good thing to be doing. Then it's making sure your UK economy knowledge is really strong. UK stats are really good. Those UK themes videos you know very well. You've got your own real world examples that you're going to bring into your essays. That's important. Then the last thing to do is really self-assess your performance from paper 1 and make sure for every little part of the paper, you've got a strategy ready to go. You're visualizing yourself in the exam hall and you know exactly how you're going to breeze through this paper and do very, very well. That's what I recommend you do in this remaining time. And you should be set. You should breeze through paper 2 as a result of that. And really, that's what you want to do, isn't it? Because paper 2 is a wonderful, wonderful exam. It's a very comfortable feeling. It's macro. It's a nice thing to talk about. There are so many interesting things happening in the UK economy at the moment. So think paper 2. It's going to be a fun time for all of you. It's going to be a celebration for all of you. It's going to be like a party for you. No, it's not going to be stressful. It's going to be a wonderful enjoyment time for you all to write about all this great macro knowledge that you know, to showcase all of that hard work that you've put in. You know the UK economy inside out. You know all of these key themes happening in the UK at the moment. Tie that to your theory and think the examiner is going to love you for it. It's your time to be conducting the orchestra. Yeah, you're going to be writing a symphony for the examiner. Your exam script is going to sing to the examiner. It's going to sound so great for the examiner. All the examiner is going to want to do is to reward you highly because of how wonderful it sounds, the wonderful tunes, the wonderful, wonderful rhythms you're going to be writing about. Yes, that's what it is. So embrace it because you've got something deeper to play for. Is a long gap for paper 3, right? So you want to be leaving that exam hall feeling confident. Yes, you want to be leaving that exam hall walking out there with a strut and a swagger. You want to be walking out there with a spring in your step because we know paper 3 is around the corner. You want your posture to be so good. You want to be standing tall, yeah, with a raised neck, with broad shoulders. You want people on the street to be stopping you on the street and saying, hey, how come you're looking so good? How come you're looking like the Don of economics? How come you're looking like the top dog, like the master? How come you're looking so great? And you'll say, yeah, it's because I smashed paper 2. I wrote down all of that great knowledge I had, not just theory-wise, but also knowledge of the UK economy, themes of the UK economy. I laid it all out there. The examiner is going to love the symphony that I've written in my exam. That's why I'm looking so good and feeling so good. And I know my prep now for paper 3 is going to be on point. It's going to be amazing. It's 2.5 weeks, yeah, but I'm feeling that buzz because of how well paper 2 went. That's what you want to be laying down. So even if paper 1 went great, like I said at the start, don't be complacent. No, don't think it's all going to be great just naturally. No, don't think it's all just going to come together without you doing anything. No, you're fighting again. You've got a lot to play for in this 2.5 week gap. You want that confidence to be like riding a wave so that your prep for paper 3 is so good. You're motivated for that paper 3 prep. That's what we're working towards, guys. It's important that therefore you focus hard, you really push hard, you have that top intensity All right. So if it is thinking hard about strategies, if it is working on areas for paper one, if it's following the advice in this live stream and pushing harder for some of the topic areas I've said, or revising certain things a bit stronger, do it. Because I want you guys to be pumped after this exam tomorrow and then to be ready to smash paper 3 thereafter. And you know how it's going to be with EconplusDal. I'm not going to stop. Paper 2 is over. I'm going to help you a lot in making sure you're ready for paper 3 as well. But fundamentally, use the remaining time well, guys. I hope paper 2 goes great for you. It's normally a wonderful paper. Follow all this guidance, and I'm sure you will absolutely smash it. You will have that spring in your step. You'll show me that strut and that swagger as you leave the exam hall, and let people stop you and ask you, why are you feeling so great? Why are you looking so great? That's what we're working for tomorrow. So thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. It's a wonderful time tomorrow. Embrace it, enjoy it, celebrate it, feel the party atmosphere. Nothing like paper 2. It's a wonderful time. And then we'll move again for paper 3. Thanks, folks. Wish you all the best. Go out there and do great. Slay that examiner again. We'll be in touch again soon. Thanks, folks. See you later, guys. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.